Hi, welcome to the AAIP Theory and Practice in Animal Assisted Interventions Conference. My name is Dawn Staley. I've been a teacher for the visually impaired and orientation and mobility instructor in Northern Michigan for 22 years. In addition to this role, I've been gifted the opportunity to run an animal assisted intervention program with my pet partner's registered dog. I was honored to be asked to co-present with Dr. Fine today, not as an expert, but as someone who has a story probably similar to your own. My story has its roots in raising puppies for leader dogs for the blind. I saw the impact and benefit these puppies had on my students, who had often been the receivers of care with little opportunity to impact others. I saw their confidence build and concepts about themselves change as they helped raise a dog that would go on to help others like themselves. Eventually, though, the puppies had to be returned for further training. I was left wondering, how can I continue this impact without constantly starting over? This began my journey with AAI. I got a puppy and incorporated her training into my work with my students. I began with advocacy to my administration and was met with an initial roadblock. It took a student advocating for a dog in his school to start the beginnings of a program. I was allowed to work at his school, which was a center-based school for students with disabilities. This looked a lot like meet and greets to classes of students. I quickly realized how much I didn't know and began researching for answers. I found a course through Utah State University called Animal Assisted Interventions in Special Populations. I was so excited to begin that I didn't look at all the details. What I thought was a 3-credit-hour course turned out to be a master's level program for their veterinary school. As fate may have it, the professor was the famous Dr. Aubrey Fine. I learned so much about the field and its history that it fueled my fire to continue this journey even further. After the course, I began studying for the professional AAI certification exam and passed. Over the past 3.5 years, my program has grown into an almost half-time position, and I now work with 2 of my dogs, Frida and Haven. I continue to learn about the field and AAI and grow as a professional. I'm thankful for AAIP for their guidance and continued opportunities for growth. I'm also thankful to Dr. Aubrey Fine. He has contributed in so many ways to this ever-growing field. Dr. Fine is a licensed psychologist, speaker, and author, to name a few. His book, The Handbook on Animal-Assisted Therapy, is going on its 6th edition. Dr. Fine, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Dawn, for having me. It's good to see you.
Thank you. What motivated you to create the first edition of the Handbook on Animal-Assisted Therapy?
It's a funny question because I don't know if I was motivated to do it at first. Probably in about 1998, as some people know, I began my involvement in animal-assisted interventions in 1973 and had been doing work. And in about 1998, there were a couple of media spurts that came out, including an article by APA about my therapy dog named Puppy. And at that time I had, it was academic press, but Elsevier reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in editing a textbook on what we call animal-assisted therapy? And I was really, really excited to do that. And so I reached out to some of the leaders in the field, like Aaron Katcher, James Serpell, Lynette Hart, Erica Friedman, and took their guidance on some people that they would recommend, other people that I thought would be wonderful contributors. And so that is how that excitement started, serendipitously, which is really how most of my world in animal-assisted interventions began, because it's really important for people to recognize I was a person that grew up without animals. I grew up being afraid of dogs. My mom didn't like them. And who would have thought that years later my life would be blessed with animals? And I had a serendipitous experience with a little gerbil that changed my life, and she became my first therapy animal by accident. And I recognized that true power of that human-animal connection.
Wonderful. What do you see as your biggest accomplishment over the course of your career?
Accomplishments. You know, when you think about it, that's a complicated word, because I don't see accomplishments being a singular thing, because they're academic accomplishments, they're human accomplishments. So if I went to the human touch, my major contribution, I think, or accomplishment, is I've touched many lives. I've touched many lives with the souls of animals that have worked alongside me.
Yes.
I've learned lessons from the animals that I work with. Accomplishments could be when people say, "Did you write books? Did you speak all over the place? Um, did you influence policy individuals?" Sure, but I think that when I really look at my life history, um, the accomplishments, in my opinion, would relate to uh, the people that I've impacted, the people that have impacted me, the animals that have impacted me, and how I've learned from that. You know, we all paint a picture. The interesting part is, an artist, you paint pictures, but people view the pictures and they see them differently. And so, to me, the picture that I hope that I would be remembered for are the influences, influencing not only the patients that I've served, but also perhaps in my own way, influencing a future professional, both a researcher, a writer, and of course a clinician, who would like to continue taking on that torch and expanding the field.
What have some of your biggest roadblocks been in this field of animal assisted interventions?
Oh, that's a great question. Roadblocks. I think the earliest roadblock was this real misunderstanding. You know what I mean? People would look at me and they would say, "Oh yeah, there's the guy with the dogs, or there's the guy with the birds," and they really didn't understand what this was. Um, Over the years, I've walked through many of those roadblocks, and I think that maybe a good way of starting the question really is the transition that the field has gone through. So over the 50 years that I've been involved, more specifically, if we wanted over the 25 years that that textbook has been around, you know, the issue of acceptance of the field. Today, if you say I'm doing animal assisted interventions, people may not know the exact word, but then once you explain, they go, "Oh yeah, I know that. I understand what that is. I see people going to the hospitals or the libraries."
Yeah.
I've witnessed the validation of science. That science is explaining to us what people have known intuitively for hundreds of years, that animals are good for our well-being. So in so many ways, science has moved the field forward.
Yes.
On the other hand, if we had a look at acceptance of validation, what are the roadblocks that I've seen as we've seen this more acceptance? I can even flip that and talk a little bit about the misrepresentation or the misunderstanding of animal assisted interventions, because it's not the only panacea. It doesn't work for all the people around there. And I think that over the last 15, 20 years in social media, we have witnessed sometimes misrepresentations and miscalculation of the total impact. I think an obstacle that I've witnessed um, is is training of individuals that do this work. You know, I learned a long time ago, because when I began doing this, um, I wasn't trained, right? I had to learn this on my own, but I knew what I knew and I knew what I didn't know. And so I understood how to work with my clients. And if I didn't, I of course got mentorship there. And I took that whole process along with my work with working alongside animals. Over the years, I've worked with experts, in my opinion, that have taught me about animal behavior, ethology, and of course, animal welfare, which um, is an area that I am still very strongly concerned with. When I began my work, most people were primarily concerned with how this could help humans. But in my opinion, we need to be the ambassadors of our therapy animals. And so that really still concerns me, is the lack of oversight for animal welfare in the practical world. I think many people do the right thing, but sometimes we may not be as educated in doing the best thing for our animals and our clients. Oversight, again, if we're looking at roadblocks, is so many people do this work with limited training and or assurances that we're doing this effectively. You know what I mean? And so that becomes a concern. And as the field has grown, I want to make sure that people learn better protocols that they could put in place. And probably the other obstacle that I would bring up would pertain to public policy and public awareness. And what I mean by public policy is, even our conference, Dawn, that we're talking about right now.
Hmm.
I wish and hope that policy people will be listening to this so they can be impactful on stakeholders, because we need to make a difference outside our circle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you throw a rock in the water, you get these circles. I want those circles, that ecosystem, to continue to grow, because when policy people recognize the innate power of this process, they will want to assure that we do this correctly. They'll open up more doors, because as many doors that we talk about today that have been open, there's still many doors that are still closed. And again, when I started talking with you earlier, I mentioned that when you said an accomplishment, um, I was touched by that question, because I think that the greatest accomplishment when you talk to people should be those that receive these opportunities and the benefits that they feel. And so I want to get this right, not only for the humans that experience this, but also for the animals that are involved, and the recognition that the field is constantly emerging. So that's the wonderful
Yes.
question: where will we go in the future?
Right. Well, for those of us who are passionate about making this a widely available and respected intervention, what are some things that we could do on the ground to promote this, to promote it to policymakers, and to make sure that we're doing the best for the animals and continuing to grow the field?
Don, it's a great question, and you started off by saying you took a class, and I always remember you in the class, how interested you were, and excited, and I think paying it forward is something that I would initially mention to professionals. Paying it forward doesn't have to be that you take on a very significant leadership role, but paying it forward would be one, maybe mentoring new professionals, telling them about it. Remember earlier on, I said one of the barriers that I think is out there are misrepresentation. So I think um, I would hope that the new generation would talk to people about what we're trying to do in this world or this space, but to recognize that it isn't the only answer, and for us to put an honest perspective. How I would hope that people that are beginning this work and that are emerging in this field will talk with other leaders of other fields, so that we educate them and perhaps influence, as I talked about, public policy, because
Right.
without opening that frontier, it becomes crucial. The whole other side really would relate to standards of practice that I'm hoping that professionals will continue to urge others to follow suit. Like Don, when you said you took the course and all of a sudden you decided that, what, I really want to study, I want to get that certification. That's a tremendous goal and ambition, and you did it.
Mhm.
How do we assure excellence? And I think we owe it to the people we serve. We owe it to the animals we work alongside, that we
Yes.
do this right. And by doing that, it's important. So I like the word pay it forward. Make sure you talk to people, demonstrate, let people meet or see what you do. Maybe write articles. They don't have to be articles in academic journals. It could be newsletters, blogs, where you help support the evidence base, and don't over sensationalize, but
Right.
tell it real. And I think people will follow suit. But To grow the field, we need a group of new leaders and passing on, if you want to look at passing on a torch, I'm not the only one that's walking around with this lit candle. There are many, many people. And the thing that I'm noticing, of course, is the individuals that I started with many, many years ago are retired or have left us. And the greatest legacy that this field will have will be the ability to sustain itself and move to the future. And if I could comment one last, if you have another question, would relate to the fact that organizations like AAAIP, pet partners, are moving the field forward. We need to recognize that we need these organizations to act as our ambassadors, act as our advocates, act as our voice piece. So together, collectively, it's important.
Yes. So acknowledging, we don't, as individuals, have all of the answers, and just seeking for constant growth and pointing us to those resources is important. So just the last question, Dr. Fine, where do you see, what is your dream for this field of animal assisted interventions in 20 years, 10 years, 20 years? What was your dream?
I've looked at my life and it's been a dream. And I've looked at my life and it's been a wink, because who would have thought that 50 years ago, when I brought a little gerbil to a program for kids with learning disabilities, that when I witnessed a little boy saying to me, "You see, I didn't move," and he was a child that had ADHD when he was holding little Sasha, that Sasha would have changed my life. What would I dream? I would dream that we will continue to impact some of the world that could benefit from this process. We'll do it better. We'll develop, I could be scientific and say that we're going to develop more, and I'm hoping protocols that are very specific, that people not only will say, I'm bringing a visiting therapy dog to a classroom or to a hospital setting for persons with cancer, or an assisted living environment for persons with dementia, but we will actually have protocols that are replicated, that we say we know they can work. So in 20 years from now, I'm hoping to see more evidence-based practice that's built on a stronger foundation of science. I'm hoping that we're going to see more multidisciplinary professionals that want to train and develop a skill set that will become a complementary therapy in their work, that will support them in reaching out. I'm hopeful that in the future, we're really going to respect more of our partners, that we're going to recognize that what's good for therapy animals is not only good for them, it's good for the therapy as a whole. We need to be their mouthpiece. We need to be their advocate. And I wouldn't do this right without saying that. But I guess the last note that I would have was really when you asked me the word accomplishments. And I'm curious if people listening will smile or say, I can't believe he went that direction. But at the end of the day, although I've shared evidence-based and I've shared all of these wonderful oversight as well as research agendas, I always want you to remember the people that we serve when they visit with our animals, because therapy is one thing, a life is so much more. And let me share with you the smiles, the tears, the laughter
Yes.
that I have witnessed over 50 years, not only because of me, but because of a cold nose and warm heart of the animals that I work with. And Dawn, I'm grateful to be able to chat with you and catch up. And I'm really grateful for all of you that are listening. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your time today, and for your leadership in the field, and in educating and helping pass the torch to this important conversation. So thank you so much.
Be well done. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.